Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is Cade, and for today's episode, we are going to be revisiting the Rocky franchise. And for today, I am joined by two returning guests. We have my dad, Rich, and we are also joined by Frank Durant. Hey Dad, thanks for being here.
How you doing?
Frank, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, likewise.
So to kick this off, we are going to be talking about the original Rocky from 1976. So the first thing I wanted to ask you guys about is, and I know it's been a long time, but do you guys remember what your experience was like when you first saw this movie back then? And was it a movie that you ever grew up with, maybe?
Yeah, I didn't probably see that movie until for the first time, probably right until Rocky 2 came out.
Oh, really?
Is probably when yeah, because
Right.
we didn't I lived in Greece until 78. So a lot of that stuff I didn't see a lot of that stuff.
No, I remember growing up watching the A Team with Mr. T, and when Rocky 3 came out, I was 4 years old. And, being from an Italian heritage family, we were prejudiced, and, Rocky's the greatest movie of all time. But my parents told me, this is part three. There is part one and part two. So I remember going to the video store and renting the old VHS tapes to watch the entire three-part trilogy of the Rocky franchise for 1982, not knowing that there'd be how many more movies, six more movies to come.
Right?
And you know what? This was actually not the first Rocky movie that I saw. The first one that I saw was the sixth one from 2006.
That's fascinating because I growing up I also read the books on the Chronicles of Narnia, and they said, oh, what's the chronological order? Should you read book five, book six first, or book one? It gives a different appreciation because like if you do start with the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, I don't care what you say, what your debate is, but by actually watching Rocky Balboa first, it's almost a time machine where you introduce this guy in the third act of his life and then going back and appreciating where Rocky came from. That's interesting because now we're talking to a younger generation where they start out watching the Creed trilogy, not knowing who's this old guy. Like Rocky's become Mick. Yeah, he's Mick, and it's brilliant how it's almost like how do you watch these nine movies and having this conversation 20 years from now? It's a fascinating topic.
Yeah, it's a circle of life here. We're doing the Lion King now.
There you go.
Well, and one thing that I've always found really interesting about the story of Rocky is how Stallone came up with it. Before he wrote Rocky, Stallone had written a couple of different scripts, and one of them was for a movie called Paradise Alley. But apparently, at the time that he sold the script, he was actually so broke, he only sold it for $100.
Oh my gosh.
But then he eventually met with the producers of Rocky and he showed them the script for Paradise Alley. And they said, well, we want to make it, but you already sold it to another producer, so we're not going to be able to. Stallone went home. He's like, oh God, I got to do something. He went for a walk one night and he walked around a place called Balboa Boulevard. And he thought, Balboa. And then that's where he came up with the idea for Rocky for that. And I mean, it's a good thing he sold that to a different studio because then Rocky probably never would have happened because of that, I think.
You'd have the Kid Salami trilogy.
Yep.
But, part of it is loosely based on the Chuck Wepner story. And Chuck Wepner was a local guy who was former hitman or enforcer who went, I think, 14 rounds with Ali. There's a little bit of Rocky Marciano in the story. You got a little bit of the Cinderella Man. Even there was a Paul Newman movie called Somebody Up There Likes Me. And there's a little bit of that in there, too. So, taking the name Rocky, Italian-American living in the streets of Philadelphia, I give Stallone more credit than people say, well, it's based on Wepner. Not really. There's elements out there, but it's a universal story of the little guy making it big. But, it hits home on many different levels. So, for me, it's an original, even though it's a universal story.
I think it's definitely one of, if not Stallone's greatest performances of all time. Have you guys ever considered it his best performance?
I don't know. I mean, I'm watching a Stallone series right now on TV that I'm enjoying. So
Oh, Tulsa King?
yeah, I've watched two seasons of Tulsa King. I just like Stallone in general. And in this movie, it was basically like the guy who's had a rough life gets a chance to get good. To be good, to be respected. I think that's all he was looking for. I mean, he was just looking to live his life, have a girlfriend, just, try to make his way through life. And then here he is. He's older. He's really a club fighter. He's not really a boxer. He's a club fighter.
Right.
And here's a guy that gets the ultimate chance because back in those days, sports and stuff like that were big, huge events. Whereas now every other day there's a sporting event, like whereas boxing and stuff like that, it was an event. It was build up, and that was the only game in town.
Plus, we don't know who the champion is. Someone asked a poll, and like people thought Lennox Lewis was still the champion. He's like, no, he hasn't been champion over a decade. So it used to be a part of like the American identity of like, oh, who's the Tyson is the champion. It's like the reign of the greatest boxer, fighter, or the now it's like you're right. It's more of how many different belts and championships. So we've come in a different direction for the last 40 years. Rich, you also make a good point because the opening of Rocky is really fantastic, and I do apologize because I majored in semiotics and symbolism at film school. So I've been kicked out of a lot of cinemas. My wife has told me to shut up many times when we're watching a movie because I see things going, ooh, did you notice that? You notice how they did that with the camera? You see that color, how they use the lighting? Rocky's about the American dream. It's 1976. Apollo Creed's dressed like Uncle Sam. We're on the streets of Philadelphia where the country, signed the Declaration of Independence. But the opening shot is a mural of God, one nation under God. We pan down, and here we have these two men fighting for like survival. And like Rick had mentioned, this is like they're club fighters. And within the first 5 minutes, you're introduced to Rocky, and he's 30 years old. He's a guy on the street, and literally both these guys killed each other for I think $15. It's like, okay, for your locker fee, your shower fee. They're smoking cigarettes. They're not really prime athletes. And Rocky's like, when can I fight again? It's like, can please put me back in the box. Please let me fight for my life. We're introduced to this guy, so we feel for him as he's a down and out guy. He's an everyday man. Once you hit 30, that's a magic number. Going, God, I'm 30. I'm halfway to dead. What have I done? Got no wife. Got no kids. Got no real job. So it's really a focus on not just the boxer, but the man. So Rocky on its own is a perfect film. According to AFI, for the last 40 years, it's one of the top 100 films ever made.
I agree. It is a pretty great film. And, apart from Stallone, the movie itself just has a really incredible cast. You got Carl Weathers, Talia Shire, Burt Young, Burgess Meredith. The cast in general is really good. They all play off each other really well. And one thing that I just really like is that Stallone still has those two turtles in the first movie.
In real life or in Rocky Balboa?
Oh, no, in real life. He still has them today.
Well, I didn't know that.
That's hilarious. Cuff and Link, right?
Yep, Cuff and Link.
Yep.
Well, but moving on from Rocky, now we're going to 1979. We have Rocky 2. And Frank, I actually wanted to hear more of your opinion on this movie because last time I had you on, you had mentioned how you're a big sequel guy and you had a lot of praise for Rocky 2.
I did. Stallone says, I think he gave Rocky a 10 out of 10. And when he basically, for Rocky 2, he gave it a 7 out of a 10. It's not as great as the original, but I give it more credit because people came back to the cinema to see what's up with Rocky. They wanted to return to Narnia, and they know the characters, they know the story. The movie starts off that night. You see them leaving the Philadelphia Spectrum by ambulance, going over the one bridge in Philly, and you're just continuing going on this journey with Rocky Balboa. So I just love the fact that audience, they root for the little guy. And is this movie a better story than the original? Absolutely not. In Rocky 3 and 4 are probably much better movies just for a storyline. But I just enjoyed the fact that the character continues to progress, even though it's more of a happier ending for him winning the belt and all that. But I like sequels. It makes a connection to the audience long before the opening credits even begin.
People came back to see Rocky win. That's why they came back. It's the one sentence description of this movie. Everybody came out to see Rocky win.
Rocky wins.
And I think that, the finale of this movie, the big fight with Apollo, I think it's probably maybe the best match in the entire franchise.
Well, I remember being a little kid, barely able to see over the edge of the chair in front of me. And just imagine being in a cinema with 200-300 people and people just cheering along with the fight. And I'm 4 or 5 years old witnessing this. So same thing when I saw Rocky 3 and 4. This is a movie. It's make-believe. It's not a live event, but people are screaming at the screen like it's happening live. This is a real fight. And they're yelling, "Go Rock," even though it's like his name is really Sylvester Stallone, This is all make-believe. But to see, I agree, to go along and say, we got to win this, and seeing the little guy win and become the greatest in the world, but at the same time, I'll go against what I just said, that the original Rocky ending is much better than any other ending in the entire franchise. He loses the fight, but he wins everything. He gets a girl. He's loved. He went the distance. It doesn't so much that he needs a belt, but for the next 8 episodes, it's all about winning in the end. It's all about the title. It's all about the prestige. And, that's the American dream. We want fast cars, the money, and the title.
And that's what would happen to all those guys back then. You'd come into a little money, you'd blow through it, and you'd be broke again. And, another, sad tale of despair, if you will.
Well, another thing that I find interesting about this movie is the whole concept of Rocky having to fight right-handed, to confuse Apollo. Stallone actually injured himself when he was training for the movie during filming. He tore his left pectoral muscle, and because of that, he couldn't fight left-handed, so he had to switch to right-handed.
And that was the reason for it?
Yeah, that's the reason for it.
Wow.
Well, I think, I hand it to Stallone because you look at him now in The Tulsa King, and he's aging well with plastic surgery. He still keeps in good shape, but he has destroyed his body for his craft. Where in Rocky Four, he almost died because Ivan Drago punches him right in the heart. He pretty much blew his heart up. So he's had muscles, bones broke, you name it, just for the love of cinema and to whether it's Rambo or Rocky. So I know a lot of people. Tom Cruise is jumping out of planes, but most actors will get a stunt double or just say, yeah, postpone the film. We'll film in 6 months once I reattach my arm or something.
Well, and apart from Stallone, one actor who I really love in Rocky 2 is Carl Weathers. I honestly think Rocky 2 has Carl Weathers' best performance as Apollo. I really like his arc in the movie, how he's desperately pursuing this rematch to prove his victory wasn't a fluke or anything. And I think he's great in all four movies that he's in, don't get me wrong, but there's just something about Rocky 2 where I think he stands out the most, and I think it's definitely his best performance as Apollo.
He plays a prideful guy better than probably anyone I've ever seen. And an egomaniac. He's just amazing in that role.
I agree because he's one dimensional in the first movie. In 3 and 4, he's a salesman. But in 2, he has the interaction with his wife. It's like, okay, he's a married guy. He's got kids. He's worried about the mortgage. He's worried about the fan mail. So you do see kind of like a more than a one dimensional story. It's kind of like it's also his sequel to see what he has to prove himself.
Yeah, I totally agree. But moving on from Rocky 2, now we're going to 1982 where we have Rocky 3. So this is the one with Clubber Lang. What are your thoughts on the character?
For a 4-year-old kid from the suburbs, he scared the crap out of me. He's probably that year for Rocky 3. It's like he was scarier than actually realizing that Mick dies, and you're trying to explain to a 4-year-old what death is. Because I remember Mr. Hooper died in Sesame Street like the previous year, so it was a year of all kids learning about death at a young age. But everything Clubber Lang, Mr. T's character, says it's gold. He's scary, even funny. Prediction, pain. He's got great one line. He's a perfect villain. He even scares the crap out of Apollo Creed in the ring. So as a little kid, I think he was probably the perfect villain, better than Ivan Drago.
Yeah, I agree.
At the time, I mean, I thought he was the toughest, most scary guy I'd ever seen in my life.
Well, one thing I think works really well is he's not just all intimidating and whatnot, but also, they mentioned at one point, Rocky tells him, you got a big mouth, and that's very true. Clubber talked so much, and I think that's really what adds more to his character and gives him more of a personality. So that's what I appreciate about it. But also, one other thing I have always liked about this movie, I always loved, the whole storyline with Apollo training Rocky to help him go up against Clubber Lang at the end. That I think
Yeah.
was always a great direction. I think it's also, if this was just a trilogy, I think that's the perfect arc for Apollo in the third one, considering how he's been Rocky's opponent for the first two, and now he have him as an ally, helping him become a better fighter. So that's one of my favorite things about the movie.
Well, also let's talk about race relations. This is early '80s, and you got a black man teaching a white man how to fight. But also it's kind of they're running on the beach together, they're embracing as two men. There's a lot to say about that because they both have a common foe, but also they grow a bondship and a friendship because at one point they were enemies. So there's a lot of universal themes. You can see this. It's more than just a movie about boxing. So when Stallone at the end of the movie is face to face and they're staring at each other and he says, go for it, that just pumped up everybody in the world saying, oh my God, Apollo's teaching them to not only, be fast and be a better boxer, but to face his fears because, the movie's also talking about fear of losing people in death, fear of losing everything. He's afraid. And you're right. It's a perfect trilogy right there. Rocky Four, I hate to say it, but you could just end it all right there and just have a perfect, 3-movie trilogy.
Thunder Lips, the ultimate male. I will never forget that the rest of my life. That was the funniest thing.
Well, just like Rick, WWF was the biggest thing. I remember WrestleMania 4 was 1985, 80. So we knew who Hulk Hogan was. That just brought in all the young kids who say, that's Hulk Hogan, because we watch it on every Saturday after the Saturday morning cartoons. So Rocky 3 was a great movie because you had a soundtrack, Eye of the Tiger, great opening. I think the movie has 3 or 4 montages. His brother Frank does a lot of cameos too. Yeah, you gotta give credit to Frank Stallone for some of his music and keeps showing up from time to time. But no, that's just a great movie where you bring the kids out. It's not just for teenagers. It's a family movie. Even though you're dealing with some adult issues, that made a lot of money for a reason.
And actually, believe it or not, Carl Weathers himself said that of all the movies, this one's actually his personal favorite because he really loved the idea of Apollo working with Rocky and everything. He also thought it was his best performance. So, I mean, I still think the first one's better, but I can understand why he would like this one the best.
The best part about this one was when they were working in the gym getting ready, when they were working together and they were both like in total unison. the boxing stances and the routines and all the stuff, getting the footwork right, getting the punching right, and the technique. I think that was the stuff that really, I loved boxing in general. You felt like you were getting a behind the scenes glimpse in what a boxer goes through so that he can go fight. And that was because we didn't have that when I was, young, I guess I would say, Kate.
I remember my father laughed like a bastard when before Rocky's in the pool. Apollo looks at Paulie and says, "Can he swim?" And
Oh
Paulie's like,
yeah.
with a name like Rock. And then you see it's very similar to when Mickey has Rocky chasing the chicken.
Hmm.
Forget. And now his Apollo trying to teach him, hey, get in the pools. You got to work muscles you didn't know you had. And just like the world of the unknown for a body, because you're right. Today now there's so many different ways to get in shape. But 40 years ago, no one would have thought that you could build up muscle tone and get a good workout by being in the pool. But I remember my father laughing because yeah, he's a rock. He's going to sink right to the bottom of the pool.
Well, you know what else? I always liked the idea. Apollo mentions at one point we gotta put him away early. We'll probably only last 7 or 8 rounds, and that's what they do. He takes down Clubber Lang in the third round. Apparently, Stallone did that because he thought, well, we already had 2 movies where they went through the entire fight, all 15 rounds, so putting it away
Right.
early might be more refreshing. And I think that that was a clever move.
Well, it's also the first fight where he's not a brawler. He's fighting like a real boxer. Apollo Creed, Ali was an amazing athlete, boxer, and he outsmarted. He didn't have to go the distance and fight 15 rounds and keep punching the guy to submission. The first, first round, Clubber doesn't get a single shot in. So you're realizing he's ducking, he's moving, he's, basically making Clubber, run out of steam. So that's the idea of like, you don't have to be the strongest puncher. Like Clubber Lang is based a little bit on Sonny Liston. Could Clubber box? Could he hit you? Was he powerful? Absolutely. But Apollo could, dance around the ring and tire you out and still be able to win the fight. So I think it's the first time we saw, going out in 3 rounds. And I remember seeing that as a kid. Just imagine for the whole 15 minutes, people screaming, yelling at the screen. And that's the real experience you want from the movies, which I don't think the cinema has had in a very long time, where a movie is very universal. I remember seeing Force Awakens. That was the first time in a long time where I saw generations come out, people dressed like the characters and just really going crazy for a movie because it meant something to them. The Rocky trilogy means a lot to a lot of different people out there. And I just remember as a little kid, it was very overwhelming, but very powerful to see people just get into it and just cheer for Rocky's victory.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, now moving ahead to 1985, now we have Rocky 4. Actually, Dad, I don't know if you remember this, but this is the Rocky movie that you and I would watch the most frequently.
Did we? I don't even remember. I think it was the one that was always on. Was it always on like in reruns somewhere?
That, and also we would always put the DVD in when those were a lot bigger. But, here's the thing with Rocky 4. Actually, I wanted to ask you this first, Dad. Does it still hold up?
Pretty much. I mean, the story is the story. I mean, because it's the fourth one, everybody knows, you kind of know what to expect. Obviously you didn't think that, Apollo was going to get taken out, early in the movie, but, Rocky coming back, let's get him one more time. The training was crazy. And also it was kind of like a sign of the times because there were lots of all that Russia stuff was actually happening, between the US and Russia. There was a lot of, let's call it that, arms race kind of stuff, lots of, world discourse. And I think that was the play on the whole movie, was to say, hey, it's us versus them, and let's go defeat them. And it was probably good for people's national awareness and stuff like that. And maybe people felt a little more, patriotic at the time.
Well, it was, it's like you look back and films of the 80s are now iconic. It's like looking at the 60s or the 70s. I saw this in the cinema too. I got my free poster on the Friday night opening. Yeah, definitely. We're going back to patriotism, communists, the Soviet Union at the time. Rocky 4 is a 91-minute movie, and there's 5 montages. So it's like almost like the entire movie is very, almost like a music video. Great soundtrack, great 80s. Even the sound of a film, it's very a time period film with the music. It's definitely right out of the mid 80s. So no, I agree with your father.
Yeah, and also, I think my favorite montage, or at least favorite sequence, apart from the training, I really do. I've always liked the sequence where he gets into his car, he's driving at night, and we see all the flashbacks from the previous 3 films and everything
Oh yeah,
kind of coming full circle. That to me has always been one of the best sequences in the entire movie.
I agree.
Survivor, Rocky's unofficial backup band.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, you know what? Actually, Dad, going back to what you were saying about no one was expecting Apollo to die or anything. Well, apparently the trailers and all the marketing spoiled Apollo's death. And that was supposed to be, the selling point. Like, this is what Rocky's fighting for. And I mean, I think that was kind of a mistake, but most people probably didn't see all the trailers as much as they do now. But I don't know, that's just my 2 cents on it. But, this movie has Dolph Lundgren as Ivan Drago. Frank, what are your thoughts on Ivan Drago? Because you had said that you think Clubber Lang's a better villain.
Well, yeah, I think I can't remember what comedian said it. He says Rocky Four is the greatest science fiction movie ever made, and the reason is because you have two white guys fighting for the heavyweight championship. And at the time, I go, yeah, that's pretty funny. That's pretty true. I think he's a great character. I don't think his backstory. He doesn't become two dimensional until Creed Two. He's a robot. He has 11 lines in the movie, I think, or 9 lines, and he's great. But Clubber, you can just tell he's from the streets. He's got a backstory. He's just as raw as Rocky was back in the original. Ivan just seems like he's a robot, and when they show that he's taking steroids, that explains everything. It's the steroids. So it's kind of a perfect '80s movie, an '80s montage film. And it's funny, as me dabbling in filmmaking, I remember blaming COVID on 3 films that I made from 2020 to 2022 out of sheer boredom. And you see Stallone during COVID re-editing the whole film to do his own version with new scenes. It's pretty much a whole re-edit of the film. And I kind of blame COVID for boredom for Stallone to do that, but also his appreciation that Rocky Four was his baby of what he was really trying to tell. By after 3 movies in a trilogy, is there really room to do a fourth one? And yeah, there's a lot more money to be made on the franchise. But Stallone definitely saw more of a backstory with the characters and what was going on with the whole American-Russia relations.
Yeah, that, and also there was lots of steroid implications. That was like the first time steroid implications became relevant in the Olympics and stuff like that.
Yep.
Between China and Russia, they were always the 2 countries that were the worst. I think Germany was bad too, but those were like the countries that were always being questioned on the validity of their Olympic medals and all that. And I think this was just something that kind of brought it to light, and it was a really serious, like, interesting take at the time.
Yep. But now moving on from Rocky 4, now we're going to 1990. We have probably the most hated movie in the entire franchise, and that is Rocky 5. Dad, I know how much you don't like this movie. Do you want to talk about it?
It's the worst one, but I think it's the story. I think he was trying to bring light to, like, the bad side of boxing. Boxing promoters always made the money, and the boxers never made the money. Boxers always got taken advantage of. They it was kind of like the music industry. You sign a bad contract when you're broke, you work your butt off, and you never get paid. That was the story. Here's Rocky, because Rocky lost all his money, and here he was starting all over again, and then picking up the guy off the street and growing him into it, only to betray him at the end of the movie. And then the end of it, the best fight of the whole movie takes place in the street and not
in the ring.
In the ring.
Yeah.
Seeing that in the cinema, I think this was a Thanksgiving movie. This came out like the Friday, Black Friday back in 1990. That was the best part of the movie because people cheered when he knocks Tommy on his ass, and he was saying, "I loved you, man," and we couldn't hear what Stallone was saying because people were just cheering because it's the best part of the film, and you wanted to knock this guy on his ass. But yeah, Stallone said he hated this film. He wrote it, but I think it was just a great opportunity for all of them to make a lot of money, build onto the franchise. But it's almost like Rocky 5. Rocky goes brain dead. Rocky loses all his money. Rocky moves back to Philadelphia. Rocky can't talk to his kid, right? Where are we going with this? Are we really going to wrap it up as like this is where we're going to end, Rocky's story? I appreciate the fact that when Rocky Balboa comes out, was it 16 years later, he incorporates the fact that Rocky 5 did take place, like it was actually canon, as opposed to just skipping over like it didn't happen. But like your father had mentioned, how you look at people like Joe Louis and other boxers who die penniless. I think that was kind of the thing where it's like, where does Rocky go from? He's already got 100 million. How can we really continue the story that people are actually going to care about his life?
Well, and I don't know how accurate this is, but originally Rocky was going to die at the end of this after his fight with Tommy Gunn. But the studio, I guess, said to him not to kill him off. And I guess that forced him to rewrite the entire script and basically change a lot of the story.
Right.
Well, I think the studio would have looked at him and said, "There's no money in Rocky dying."
Mm.
Right.
That's probably what happened. Is there's no money in Dead Rocky.
Totally agree. If he dies in five, we wouldn't have gotten Rocky Balboa, and I love Rocky Balboa. I think it's the second best movie in the franchise.
I agree. Although I will say that there is one thing about this movie that I've always liked. It's that scene where Rocky goes back to the old gym and he has that flashback of when he was training with Mick. And then, Mick gives him the cufflink and he says, "Hey, with you, kid, I got a reason to keep going on. I'm going to stay alive. I'm going to see you keep doing what you do." That to me is, just in my opinion, one of the best moments in the entire franchise and probably the best moment of the movie.
I agree. Burgess Meredith was a great actor. I think just for that cameo alone, it kind of adds into, okay, is this really? There's no Apollo, there's no Mick. Who's the old guardian like Gandalf figure? Because it wasn't going to be Tony Burton. One thing I do appreciate about this movie is Stallone and the two original producers, the
Robert Chartoff and Erwin Winkler.
yeah, they brought back everybody that was available that was affiliated with the original Rocky, and there's tons of cameos, even in some of the deleted scenes where the original girl who played the girl he walks back to her home, screw you, creepo, she does a cameo, the original actress from '76. But even Lloyd Kaufman from Tromaville, the Toxic Avenger, he was a production manager or assistant director. He shows up as a homeless guy for like 5 seconds. So they brought, in a way, this film was going to be the close of the series, I believe, because they brought a lot of people back affiliated, even if they were just background extras. You had even Jimmy Gambino, who played Jimmy, the guy who pretty much kicks Rocky out of his locker in part one. He makes a cameo. So it was almost kind of like a reflection of let's everybody come back together so we can say goodbye and give Rocky a final farewell.
Yeah, and also one thing about Rocky 5 that's always annoyed me ever since I was a kid was in Rocky 4, when they leave for Russia and you see his son Robert, Robert's maybe 9 or something, but
Yeah.
then at the beginning of 5, when they get back from Russia, Robert is now a teenager. So I really don't know how to explain this. Did they spend a couple years in Russia and they just didn't talk about it?
Hey, those are just details, man. Don't worry about this. It helps the story.
Look at the big picture, not the small picture. But yeah, the kid has amazing growth throughout the short time period. So he's going from basically baby to 10 to 13. Yeah, so he's amazing growth spurts in the Balboa family.
Yeah. But moving on from Rocky 5, now we're going to 2006. We have Rocky Balboa. And Frank, you mentioned that you think it's one of the best movies in the franchise. What do you like so much about it personally?
Stallone really proves everybody right. The movie's about him trying to get a second chance. He still has, stuff in the basement, like he says. But he's almost bringing this movie back on his own. He used his own money. He had to pay off production people to say, I'm doing this. I'll change it, call it Rocky Balboa. So he's almost trying to prove to his audience that people still care about Rocky. And he's got a great Jack Dempsey quality because, like Dempsey's place, if Rocky was going to stay in Philadelphia, what's he going to do as a retired boxer? Probably open up his own nightclub or restaurant. And what's the perfect name to name his restaurant?
Adrian's.
Perfect. It's just so you see the real human being, but the speech he has with his kids, the relationship with Paulie. He's a widower now, and you just see this real character. He's not so much the boxer, but you look at this guy that you've gone from 1976 all the way to 2006, and you care about the guy. You root for him, even though you can tell he's got a little bit of Jake LaMotta where he's talking about stories, he's mumbling. The customers are just trying to, it's Rocky. Just give me. He's going to do another movie. Let's go watch it. But you're just blown away with not just the fight at the end, but his in his 60s trying to prove something to people. And the conversation I said before with his son, it's a perfect scene. He pretty much gives the best education, gives his son an outlook of what life's all about. And once again, the movie's more than just about boxing.
Well, and I think that the cool thing about this movie, it's a good continuation, for the franchise, but apart from boxing, I think it's a movie that also works pretty well as a father-son story because you have that whole side with his son Robert, like you were talking about that scene. Robert says to him, it's not easy being your son. People see me and they think of you, and they go into that longer talk. And then you get one of the best quotes, I think, in the entire franchise when he says, it's not about how hard you can hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
Well, he used that line as a life lesson.
Yes.
That's the part that's so endearing about that, and the part that he made a significant thing, a teachable moment, which I feel like in life those aren't always easily presented.
And actually, Frank, I was wondering if I could get your opinion on this. So it's also directed by Stallone, like many movies in the franchise. Do you think that it's his best work as a director?
Ooh.
Because we've also got Rocky 4, 3 and 2, Paradise Alley, the fourth Rambo from 2008, The Expendables, and he even directed Staying Alive with John Travolta.
And I like Staying Alive. I'll tell you this though, I give Stallone more credit with Rocky Balboa because of his budget. Rocky Balboa is a very low budget film. I don't have the exact figure, but for Rocky 4, I want to say he had all the millions of dollars he could work with. He had the best people in the studio. This really feels like a small cast, small, it feels like an independent film because he's on the streets of Philadelphia. It's really a lot of conversations, people talking, where it shows that he's taking on these great characters, a great story, a great script, and making it into a great movie. Where if you have $100 million, you better make a good movie. You know, I don't
Yeah.
care if the Titanic looks real or not. If you have $100 million, you make sure that thing looks real and it's a great film. And don't forget, it's part of the whole Narnia thing. You're returning to Narnia again. You've gone with this guy. Look at Rocky. The turtles are still alive. He's making breakfast for Paulie. Paulie's still a schlep, you know, and like you see him, you know, now he's just sitting by the grave all day waiting to join his wife or his dead wife. It's real. And you're looking at this guy going, okay, he's been out of the ring. He's still in Philadelphia. He's buying his own food. He's got glasses now. He's still trying to punch the bag. You're going along on this journey with this character, and you're so happy this movie, right in the first couple of minutes, it's so much better than Rocky Five, you know? And it just really, it's almost a wonderful swan song of an ending because he goes, yo, Adrian, we did it. So it's really another film that you could have wrapped this up at Rocky 3. You could have wrapped it up with Rocky 4. You could definitely wrap it up with the so-called Rocky 6 with Rocky Balboa.
Yeah, I agree. And it's too bad that Talia Shire didn't come back, but I think that Stallone choosing to have Adrian die, I think that was probably one of the best, I guess, motivations for wanting to make him, come out of retirement again to have one last fight. I think it makes sense why he did that.
Yeah, but it was all the pressure and everything too, and that was the only time because this is the one with Antonio Tarver, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So here's the only time he had an actual boxer that he was boxing against too. That was the part that was interesting. As far as and Antonio Tarver at the time, he was a champion heavyweight. I saw the fight he won it on too, and I can't even remember who it's against. I'm actually like embarrassed that I can't remember it. But he was a really good fighter, and I think he brought some cachet to it as well. The fact that he's actually getting the ring with an actual fighter. It isn't just some actor. I felt like it really added something to it. It made it even more realistic. I mean, as realistic as a 60-year-old guy getting in a boxing ring. But
You know what's funny, Dad? If you look at it, saying how he's 60, if you look at this movie and then you look at something like Rocky 3, at 60, he's a lot bigger in this movie than he was in Rocky 3 over 20 years prior.
Oh,
well, yeah,
easily.
because he trained different, because he trained for strength, because he couldn't train for speed and all that stuff. So he trained to be strong.
Well, the funny thing is, if you look at Rocky 3 and 4 and the sound effects when Rocky gets punched, the sound from the sound effect department sounds like his skull is being crushed. When you hear the sound effects in Rocky Balboa, it sounds like a real boxer hitting another boxer. But also the way they film it, it's actually filmed like a modern day boxing match until you get into the whole montage of the 10 rounds. It's a great movie. It's really, you believe in this character just as much as you believed in him in the original Rocky. You're really rooting for this guy because once again, he's at that point where he's not 30, but now he's 60. But a lot of people just have that relatability of, I'm not dead yet, but my story's already been told. It's a double story because from 1990, when Rocky 5 came out, there was a whole, I want to say, 7 or 8 years that Stallone was doing a lot of bad movies. He's making good money doing films, but not until Copland came out. When Copland came out, it was a different
Yes.
side. And you see Stallone going, wow, he's actually acting with De Niro and Ray Liotta and Harvey Keitel, and he's at that same level.
That was his comeback movie.
It was, but he's playing a very. He took Rocky Balboa like Copland. He goes, "Oh, here's Rocky now in his 60s. Why do we care about this aging old has-been boxer?" And it's the second best movie of the series.
Yeah, and also in the 90s, he also had one of Dad's favorite action films, Demolition Man.
Oh God.
I love
Okay.
that movie. It's so campy and bad. It's so campy and bad, but I love it.
Well, I already said that I thought Rhinestone was a great movie. It's not a great movie in the same caliber as other great films. Like you can't compare it to Rocky. Well, Demolition Man, it's not an epic. It's a fun movie. It's a futuristic rom-com in a way, But other films, yeah, he's had his highs and lows.
But now that we're done talking about Rocky Balboa, now we're going to 2015. We have Creed. My question is with Creed, when you guys realized that the franchise was going to be continuing, after Rocky Balboa, which I think was a pretty satisfying ending in general, were you guys a little hesitant when Creed first got announced? Like, were you not really sure if it was going to be good? Did you think, I don't know about this? Like, what were your thoughts when you found out that this was going to happen?
Initially, studio cash grab. That's what I thought. I was like, I'll give it a chance because, you're invested, you got 40 years of your life wrapped up in this, so why not? But it just felt like a cash grab. But I don't know. The movie was really good, and I feel like they learned a lot of the lessons, especially the fight scenes are what are most memorable about these movies for me. The Creed movies is because they're so good. It's like you're fighting through his eyes.
Absolutely. But what about you, Frank?
Well, I kind of agree with your dad. At first, I thought, really, now we're trying to get some more money. Paulie's dead now, so Adrian Paulie's no longer involved. And don't forget now, these last three films are called Creed. They're not called Rocky 7, 8, and 9. So in a way, they're part of the film series, but Stallone is a supporting actor in this, and he's fantastic. He's the Rocky Balboa we last saw almost a decade before. There's elements of Rocky 3 in this, where Apollo was training Rocky. Now Rocky's being almost like the local parente, the father figure for the young Creed.
He's become Mickey at this point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're in the Rocky verse.
and, Stallone's not a Shakespearean actor, but when he's talking about the bowl, put everything in a bowl and say, "Here, give me one more day with my wife," it shows just the humaneness of this character, where he's being told he's got cancer. And it's like, all right, Rocky's dying again for the upteenth time. But it adds to that story where both these men are growing from each other and leaning on each other. And just like the ending of Rocky 1, Creed does not win the championship at the end, but he regains his life. He's now actually he's got a name, he's got a title, he has a mission. And it's the perfect transition into the Creed 2.
We'll look at it through the eyes of if so picture Adonis as an actual person. You're the illegitimate child of one of the greatest athletes to ever live. So and now and the whole time in your life you've basically not been able to, be acknowledged for who you are. So he basically spending his whole life looking for reaffirmation or whatever, for people to understand and respect him and that he wasn't just some bad mistake his father made, and to actually make good on it all. That's all that guy's searching for his whole life. And he gets to face that moment. And I think that's the part that the whole movie's about that.
Yeah, and one of the things I like about this that they brought back from Rocky 2 is the scene where Rocky has Adonis chase the chicken around.
There's also parallels where in Rocky Balboa, when Robert says, I'm in your shadow, they see me, they want to know about my famous dad. So there's just parallels from all the other past movies that comes up in Creed, where it's like, all right, he's the illegitimate son, he has something to prove himself, but also he takes the title, takes the name of Creed, and it's poetic there because I think the Creed trilogy stands alone. It just helps that Stallone's in the background. You add those little elements of the first six movies.
Do you guys think this movie would have been as effective as it is if Stallone wasn't in the movie at all?
No.
No, because he's the bridge. I guess that Stallone's the bridge from Rocky to this. You needed a bridge, and that's what gives. Because I think this wouldn't have done as well as a standalone.
Yeah, I agree. But moving on from Creed, now we're going to 2018. We have Creed 2. Hey, Dad, here's a debatable question. Is this movie better than the first one?
It's a biased question because Stallone's performance in one is better than in two. But two, it becomes more of a Rocky film because now we're bringing in the canon from Rocky 4. Creed 2 is kind of a better movie because now we're talking about the history of this man killed your father, and then Drago now has a two-dimensional character. Now it's a father-son figure where it's like Rocky's training Adonis, and Creed 2 is more for the Rocky fans.
Yes.
Creed 1 is really a staple of making a Creed into its own franchise, and Rocky's there as the bridge, like your father mentioned. So it's kind of the two different movies, but Creed 2 is more of the connection to the original franchise.
And not an origin story.
Right.
Well, and one complaint that I hear a lot about this movie is that it's a predictable sequel. And I can see the argument because, I guess it's kind of similar to the formula from Rocky 3 in some way, losing the fight, training again to win the second fight. But sure, it might be predictable, but I don't consider it bad because of that. The weird thing about it is when I first saw this, what I found really surprising is, and Frank, I don't know if you'd want to add on to this, that I actually like Dolph Lundgren better in this movie than in Rocky 4.
No, I agree because it gives a backstory. It's just real. Before he was just a robot. Now he's like, remember when they have the sit down at Adrian's? He's like, "Is that you?" And like these two old giants are sitting down to have a conversation, and it's like you can tell the fans would love to see what happens if Drago and Rocky ever bumped into each other. What would they talk about? And Drago gives his whole backstory, what's happened for the last 30 years. It's great for any Rocky fan. You have to appreciate that scene.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And if you wanted that, like you're saying, that what would happen, like if you put it over to another movie, what would happen if Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader walked into a bar in Dagobah?
There you go.
That it's the same, would they sit down and talk, or would they duke it out? What would they do?
I remember being in the cinema for Rocky Balboa, and this is Rocky's going into the final fight, and in the audience is Mike Tyson. And you can tell Mike's just ad libbing, like, yeah, I'm a real fight. I'd kick you, kick your butt, whatever. There was somebody behind me thinking, man, it would have been cool if Clubber Lang made a cameo. And I thought,
Yeah.
yes, it would have been great if Mr. T was in the audience. Says, hey, former Clubber Lang, former champions there to either root for Rocky or just do a cameo. It's the same thing. To have Drago come back kind of shows you that there's unfinished business. He's now avenging his father. To give you another answer, yeah, Creed 2 is a better movie than Creed 1, but Creed 1's a better performance by Stallone, and it's a perfect origin film to start its own trilogy.
And you know what, Frank, I don't know if you're aware of this, but they cut one scene from the movie that I think was a mistake. Originally, there was going to be a brief fight between Rocky and Drago, actually. They were going to bump
Yeah.
into each other, and they got into a fist fight. I wish they kept that in the movie, to be honest.
Well, it's funny. I got into an argument because I went to see this at a cinema, and I was pissed how the movie ended with the final fight. And we're all a bunch of, film graduates, film students, film appreciating. And they go, how would you have done it? And it's about the idea of throwing the towel, how Rocky doesn't throw the towel and Apollo dies in the ring in Rocky 4. And after being knocked down twice, like, I just thought it was going to be a situation where it was good that Drago ended up throwing the towel to save his son. But I wanted a scene where Rocky is like, Adonis, stop, you're going to kill him. And he's having flashbacks, and Rocky grabs the towel. Like he's actually going to throw the towel in to actually have Drago win the fight because he doesn't want to see his son die like Adonis's father died. Before he does it, Drago throws the towel. That's just me being picky because it's not my film. It's not my series. But there's definitely that kind of repeating history where you realize, all right, it's like he's avenging his father, but Drago now has to be the one to save his son where Rocky couldn't save his friend. So, that's me being a critic, but this movie was made for the fans. I think it's definitely a great movie for anybody who's seen Rocky 4, cares about Stallone. And the ending of this is great because Rocky goes home. He pretty much, his son lets him in, and he just says, I was in the neighborhood. And it just means a lot that that little kid they got to be Rocky's grandson looks just like Talia Shire. and the fans know that when he comes around the corner at the end, he says, you look just like his mother. Everybody in the audience is thinking that. So it's almost like it's going home. Rocky doesn't have to be a boxer. He doesn't have to be a boxing coach or anything. He just wants to go home and be a grandfather. And I think it's fantastic that he doesn't make an appearance in Creed 3.
Yeah, I agree. Well, with that, now we're moving on to the final movie on this. We are going to 2023. We have Creed 3. I gotta be honest, I actually really, really liked this movie. Dad, you actually watched this, I think, pretty recently. What were your thoughts on it?
I think the story's good. Introducing the character was good. It was good to have like a little bit of an arc with them being friends and the whole I kept you out of jail and you're who you are because of me. And it was cool. It was I think it was realistic. The story seemed very authentic, I guess, is kind of that I can like explain it. I don't know. I thought it was really good. It was well done. The choreography of the fight scenes, I just feel like they keep getting better and better and better.
Well, and also, this movie was directed by Michael B. Jordan, who plays Adonis. This was his directing debut. And from a, director and leading man perspective, I think he really did a really great job.
Well, yeah, he's becoming his own Stallone because Stallone also started directing later films in the franchise. I don't know why people don't like this film. I think it's a good movie. I think I agree with everything that your father said. And, Rocky doesn't make an appearance. I think he's mentioned briefly. Drago Jr. makes a cameo, which is nice, but it stands alone as its own film as a part of a trilogy. The Damien character is right out of Clubber Lang's Sonny Liston. So I think that's got some parallels from Rocky 3 with who this character is. But it's a separate movie on its own. That it's kind of interesting that it's part of the series, but really not.
Well, and what's funny? One thing that kept getting brought up, people kept saying Creed 3 should be about Adonis fighting Clubber Lang's son. And that was a really popular, concept that people kept bringing up. But to be completely honest, I'm really glad that they didn't do that because, and this is just me, but we already got a movie with Adonis fighting the son of one of Rocky's old enemies. I don't think we needed another one.
We didn't need wash, rinse, repeat. No, but there's an actual story that goes with this. You know what I mean? That's the part that's so good about it. It wasn't just, hey, let's regurgitate what happened 30 years ago and see, and throw it out there and see if somebody will watch it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that the final fight between Adonis and Damien, I think that's probably of all three Creed movies, that might be my personal favorite.
It was so much more punishing, I feel like, than real boxing.
I think honestly, I'm at that point where I'm getting older and I reflect on earlier films. Like you can't beat Rocky 3 for just the intensity of the fast 3 rounds where and being there as a little kid, just seeing people going nuts nonstop like it was a real life fight. Nothing else has come close to it. Just because sometimes when you stop and you realize, hey, we're watching a movie, now you can hit pause. Back in the day when you were there, it's live, even though it's not a live show, it's a movie. Yeah, as a kid, that was just so iconic that you watch it now. Watch Rocky 3 fight with Stallone and Mr. T. It's great. It's just it's you can't compare it to any other fight.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, I know that it's not going to be the next movie in the franchise technically, but are you guys interested in seeing the biopic that's coming out soon? I Play Rocky.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, it's definitely curious.
All right. Well, I guess that's it. Frank, Dad, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
That was a pleasure. Thank you, man.
All right, guys, thanks so much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you all again very soon.